Welcome to a Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hello, I'm Andrea Vacca, and this is a Better Divorce podcast. And today I'm very happy to welcome Wendy Paige Sterling to the show. Wendy is a trusted, intuitive business coach who helps women unlock their true potential by letting go of the past, reclaim their inner strength, and step into their lives filled with purpose, authenticity, and unwavering faith. Wendy, you're also the host of the Power in the Pause podcast. And your previous podcast was the Divorced Women's Guide podcast, right?
Correct.
Well, welcome to a Better Divorce podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
I'm glad you could be. You know, when we were talking before the podcast, you mentioned that something that a good friend of mine says a lot, and I hear it in my head a lot. And then you said it, and it was things happen for us and not to us. You know, things don't happen to us. You said things happen for us. And I love that because it really helps us to focus on the opportunities that are there when challenges arise. And there are many challenges in divorce or after divorce. So I know you've been divorced. You've spent a number of years serving as a divorce coach for women, and you're now working more with women after the process and who are in business and in entrepreneurs and trying to create a new role for themselves. But knowing all that you know about working with divorced women, are there any common opportunities that you've seen come out of divorce for women that you'd like to share that maybe looks like really hard challenges, but in the end are actually opportunities?
Yeah, I think where we started or where you started this conversation is that, our divorce happens for us. And, I'll use a little bit of my own personal story to share how I was able to flip the script basically for myself. And that was, my very unexpected divorce was not only just a wake-up call for me in terms of me realizing what a people pleaser I was, but it was also a wake-up call for me to realize that I was not honoring my values. I was not honoring who I was. And ultimately, I felt stuck in a vision of who people saw me to be instead of really owning and being proud of who I actually was. And I think I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but yet I worked, 2 decades in corporate America as an executive and leading. And what I find most of my clients to be in a similar position is, many times our divorce winds up just being that catalyst that not only wakes us up to our marriage and sort of how we've shown up there, but ultimately what I believe is that the way we show up one place is the way we show up everywhere. And so, what you can choose to do when you're, confronted with divorce or any other life transition is really look at it as an opportunity for you to reevaluate and see if there are other opportunities for you. If you are living through your heart center, if you are passionate about not just your life, but your business. I mean, how many hours a day do you spend at work versus with your loved ones, right? We spend so much of our week at work or doing work or in business. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean that that's what fuels you. It doesn't mean that that's what lights you up from the inside. And that was a really hard lesson that not only I learned, but it's something that my clients come to realize as well, which is that they're really good at what they're doing, but they're just burned out. They're tired. It takes 10 times the effort. They want to be working less and making more. And isn't that, everyone's goal? And, I think my divorce enabled me to not only give myself permission to do that, but to also figure out how to do it and how to do it that much faster.
So there's some silver lining, basically. When the marriage is over, there's something you can look to see, like what also isn't working, because like you said, how you do something is how you do everything, right?
Yes.
But and this is a better divorce podcast because, as you know, I say I want you to have a better life on the other side of your marriage. But let's be realistic that when you're in the middle of a divorce, um, it's really hard to think about your future, and your current life feels like it's falling apart. It's transitioning. We know that, but when you're in it, it feels horrible, right? So
Yes.
what advice do you have for somebody in the middle of a divorce that will make it more likely that they can create that life that they want, and not just a life that they end up with?
Yeah, we talked about this the other day when we were discussing the podcast. I think so many of us keep ourselves stuck and say, until I know what my divorce settlement's going to be, I can't plan anything. I don't know what my life is going to look like. I can't make any decisions yet. And those are just excuses. I'm known for being a very bold, tough-loving coach, and that is just who I am. But using your divorce not being done is just an excuse because you're still stuck in fear. You're afraid of what is on the other side. And what I know to be true is that it doesn't, and I've seen it with me, I see it with all of my clients. It's what's important is having a vision. If you don't have a vision of the life and or business that you want on the other side of your divorce, then of course you're living in the past and you're not living in the present with the vision of your future in mind. One of the things that I love, the exercise I love doing with my clients is really helping them to see what it is that they want on the other side. So many of us come to realize that the marriage wasn't working, that you and your spouse had grown apart. And while every single person always says to me, those with kids always say, but what about the kids, right? So many people I almost stayed, I was almost, well, I would say I fought for my marriage, for my kids. I knew it wasn't right for me anymore, but I would have done anything to keep my family together. But ultimately, that is not serving your kids. It is not serving their future. It is not serving your future. So having an actual vision and daring yourself to dream. I mean, I don't know about you, I don't know about your listeners, but I never dreamt outside of my spouse's dreams. It
Mm.
was always about him or the family, and I just went along with it. And I'm okay to admit that now because I don't do that anymore, but I did do that. It was about the vision of the family and everybody else and not me. And so what I would invite your listeners to think about if you're really in the middle of this is dare to dream about what's possible because your mind is so powerful. It is so I can't stress this enough. Everything I have dreamt, I have created. And that is because I act in the mindset of future Wendy already having that vision. So, what would Wendy already in that position do today? Well, if you're stuck in the middle of your divorce and you're sitting there and telling yourself, oh, I don't know, I can't make any plans, I don't know what my settlement's going to look like. Well, of course, you're not moving. Of course, you're stuck because you have no vision. But what if you did? What if you had that? What would shift? What would be different?
Mhm.
And I promise you, the momentum that's going to come behind just declaring what that vision is, as soon as the universe hears you, it's going to respond. It's powerful. Our words are very powerful.
They are, and thinking about a vision, if it's hard for you to come up with it, I just saw somebody who she and her husband, and this is an
Mhm.
intact family with a child, but in the beginning of the year, they all do vision boards for
I
themselves.
love
And it's like
that.
a 10-year-old and a lawyer and a doctor. Like these are
Yeah.
the family, and they all take out the magazines and make a vision board. You don't need the whole family to do that. They make their own vision boards, but it's coming up like that could be a way to do this. Like, what is the life that you
Yeah.
want, right?
Yeah, and we're at the start of the year. I mean, I invited my boys are now 17 and 14, and I invited them to pick a word of the year. What
Mm.
is your word for the year? Because that is what you get to embody. That is your vision. So, how are you going to embody that word with every action that you take? Because that's who you get to be all year long. The easiest way to create a vision is to pick a word and be it. My word of the year is faith. not having faith, but to be faith. And so for me, my vision for 2024 is all around trusting that the universe is going to show me exactly what is going to come to fruition and to trust the path. And so if your word of the year, I've got clients whose words of the year are confidence, expansion. Great. So how do you embody that? Because if you're in the middle of your divorce and your settlement is not complete yet, and let's say your word is confidence, well, what that tells me is that you already are confident that no matter what your settlement looks like, you're going to be fine. So create a vision of what a confident you looks like no matter what, because your divorce, your divorce doesn't define you. By sitting here and waiting on a decision, waiting on a piece of paper, you're allowing your divorce to define you. You're allowing your results, the outcome, to define you. Think about that. Is that what you want? Or would you rather have a word of the year or a vision board to define who it is that you are and what you get to create this year?
Love that. My words last year were space and grace. I had 2 words.
I had 2 too. Mine were trust and surrender.
And this year's gratitude.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and part of that gratitude is also being grateful for what I've done or haven't done, where I am today, even if it's not where I think I should be, stop shooting on yourself. So
Exactly.
I think that gets in the way of a lot of clients that I work with as well. Like they feel a lot of they feel like they made mistakes, or it's hard to think about the future because they're so stuck in like, well, I'm not perfect, So um how, that's negative self-talk that people have.
Yes.
You have tips for that? That's a
I
question. Do you have
do.
tips for that? Do you have
I do. I think that it's so hard when we live in a world where, and I think I'd mentioned this to you yesterday, but, you know, we live in a world where we're inundated with so much negativity every single day.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we are all on autopilot of inner critic, negative voices, glass half empty. And it takes effort to change your mindset, right? Because you've been on autopilot for so long. And so the exercise that I walk my clients through when trying to figure out if it's a negative inner critic speaking to you or if it's really your inner truth is to ask yourself, like, what is factual about this particular statement? Like, what are the facts that you have to back this up? Because 99.9% of the time, there are no facts. Okay. And telling me, well, this is what they did before. That's not present day. That is not present. That is not future. It is not evidence, right? So what is the evidence that you have to support that statement? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not true. It's your ego that is trying to actually protect you. But what it's doing is it's keeping you small. It's keeping you stuck. And it's keeping you in this place of not playing big. And yeah, growth is uncomfortable, but it should feel exciting at the same time. So when you hear yourself say, oh, better not do that. Oh, you remember what happened last time you tried this? You hear that little voice. And sometimes, I don't know about you and I don't know about your listeners, but like my inner critics have very distinct personalities. They have tones that are not my heart, that are not leading from my heart. And so I know when to recognize them and to be like, wait a second, is what happened before going to happen? Like, how do I know I don't know that that's going to happen now. Like,
This is
that's
different.
not true. Right. And then once you realize that it's not factual, then ask, like, what's another perspective? Oh, well, this could actually go my way. Oh, yeah, it absolutely could go your way. And then from there, it's taking action from that place. Because when you listen to the inner critic, typically there is no action. There is inaction. You just
You're stuck. You don't do
stop.
anything. Right.
Exactly. But the goal of life is to keep you in momentum. It's to keep you moving. It's to keep you in transformation. And so until you have an actual action to take, then recognize that you're stuck in negative voices.
Yeah. You had mentioned a client who was getting feeling really bad about herself because of guilt, like she had a certain parenting schedule and she was going to have to work and do something big for work, and that would require her not to have the kids when she was scheduled to have the kids, and she was feeling really guilty about asking her ex-husband for help. And so it was like on the risk of like not letting her move forward in her business and take those steps because of guilt of what she was telling herself about what a good mother would do. Do you remember
Yeah.
you told me a little bit about that story?
I do. And that story is where guilt comes in. So if it's not just fear that comes in when negative voices are talking, but this is a great example of when you start feeling guilty, right? I'm a working mom. I have my kids 50% of the time, and so does my client. She shares custody of her kids. And she was hosting an event coming into the new year, and it happened to be that it was on her custody schedule. And she reached out because she was, cycling, spiraling herself into like the guilt and the shame pattern that many of us get caught up in, especially I think as working moms. And so we sat down and we had a conversation about, okay, so you have to work. Your kids know that you have a job. Your kids know that you own your own business. And what might be another perspective about the kids having to go be with their dad? And so we talked through a couple of different perspectives, but the one that she landed on was, well, they get extra time with their dad, right? Their dad's actually going to do something with them versus if I had them locked in their rooms while I'm on Zoom leading this workshop, they'd be bored, they'd be playing video games, they would could interrupt. But instead, the perspective she landed on was, well, at least they're going to be doing something active and they get bonus time with their dad. And when you shift that perspective, right, and you choose to look at it differently, all of a sudden the guilt goes away because you're like, yeah, of course I want my kids to have a relationship with their father. And what a gift that not only can their dad help, but that their dad is actually going to do something interactive with them. Like, who doesn't love when your co-parent is engaging with your kids? And
And that,
so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that energy that she's putting out there, like I have this opportunity. I'm taking care of myself and our business. It's going to help all of us, right? If I can do this
Exactly.
thing, and you get to be with your dad. So that whole shift for the kids on, mom's doing something really important, and we get to be with dad, and dad's picking up, the whatever the slack is, and being with the kids. Like the whole family
Right.
is supporting it, and that's such a better energy than be in your room and don't talk, don't make any noise while I'm on Zoom.
Exactly, and you can even feel it, right? Like, you can feel the tension in the, like, "Stay in your room, oh my god, and she's not gonna be present," versus, "They're off, I don't have to worry, I'm very present with the people that are attending," and it's there's a difference between high and low vibration when it comes to energy, and so many times we choose to stay in that low vibration because of fear or guilt or judgment or insert negative, emotion wherever, versus shifting into that higher vibration. It's lighter and it's where love is, and grace and gratitude, and it's just, you can feel the difference.
Absolutely. Children pick up on all this energy that the parents are putting
Yes.
off. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's been putting off, ending the relationship because worried about the kids, and we talked about like
Mhm.
how sad it must be in their home for the children to see the parents fighting, and
Yes.
not, or in this case not talking to each other, where the father wouldn't even look at the mother for
Mm.
years. He won't look at her, but he doesn't want to end the relationship either. So what is that doing to your children, right? And what kind of model is that giving them? So if you can go out and create the life that you want, and you say, this wasn't working for us, you know, it was not the
Yeah.
right relationship, like giving your children that opportunity to see you moving into your power. Like that's a awesome parenting.
It is, and and I'll tell you, two homes that are happy, way better than one home that is not, that is unhappy, that is tense. There's animosity. I will never forget my oldest son when his dad and I have been separated, or sorry, we've been divorced for about 7 years now. And I think so. He's 17, so he was 10 when we separated and ultimately divorced. When he was about 12, I remember him saying to me, Mom, I don't, I'm not happy that you and dad aren't together, but God, you guys are so much happier apart. He's like, it was so hard living with you guys those last couple of years. And it was such an eye-opening moment for me because number one, I was like, I thought I hid this really well, like,
Weren't
and
fighting in front of you, but
right, right.
energy.
But it's the energy that they can feel in the house. And it was so powerful. And like to the point where I actually asked, I was like, could you do like a live with me in like my divorce Facebook group so other people can hear you say this? Because what I don't think a lot of us divorcees realize is the impact tension in a home between two parents who should not be together anymore creates for your kids. The mental, the emotional, the physical ramifications in your children are far worse than if you just cut the cord and you let one another be happy. I mean, at the time I didn't want to be divorced. This wasn't the face of a divorcee. And yet at the same time, I was like, best decision I ever made, not just for me, but for my kids. My kids are so much better off that their dad and I are not together. And I've said to you too, like he and I, it was not amicable in the beginning. And it took me doing the work on myself to flip the script, to flip my relationship with him. And we are closer now than we've ever been. And I shouldn't say ever been probably the last 5 years of our marriage, right? And I would rather have this than have ever stayed married to him.
Right.
You become a better person. Like, you know, the thing that really frustrates me is, the D word, right? Oh, don't, God forbid, like, you tell somebody you're getting divorced. Oh, I'm so sorry. Why? Congratulations. Good for you. Right? When you hear somebody getting married, do you go, oh, I'm so sorry? Like why is divorce have to be negative? Like for so many of us, it's a choice that we pick. And ultimately it is the best choice that you could make for your family. Like honest to God.
And so instead of having the children see you sad and angry and resentful and after the divorce, if you can start shifting that to their future, what we started talking about, what's the vision you want for your future, and they can see you living into that future. I mean, what is that doing for them? That is just giving them so much more power to feel like they can do it too. So that's what you want to model, not a vision of
Exactly.
sadness and fear, but we can do this. Like we're going to have a better life, and you're going to have a great life with your other parent too. One thing I think I see a lot though is that clients who are coming out of emotionally abusive relationships, and it could be extreme abuse, it could just be benign but consistent,
Sure.
ongoing, ever present abuse, emotional abuse. Um, they can't get their ex out of their head. They're always there. They can't think about what they want because like you were with your ex, with your husband and kids, what do they need? What do they want? And that can last for years even after you're no longer living together.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I guess any tips for how to move away from that? If you keep hearing yourself getting pulled back to, oh, well, how will he react if I say this? Or how will they, react? Or what do they need before putting yourself last, basically?
Yeah, two things come up for me of how I want to answer this. The first one is that, when you guys get on an airplane with your kids, right? The flight attendants come up to you. Exactly. And they say, put your face mask on you so that you can then assist and help your kids and put the mask on them. It took me a little while to understand that if I'm not okay, neither are my children. And when I didn't put myself first, my kids were not okay because I was showing up angry and bitter and resentful and sad and depressed and anxious. And when I nurtured myself, and sometimes that looks like days that I share my kids 50-50 still. And, days even that I have them, like there'll be mornings where I'm like, on the weekends, I'm like, yeah, I'm sleeping in today. Like, figure it out, make your own breakfast. I've taught my kids how to make their own breakfast now. Right. And my kids get to see that if I don't take care of myself, I can't show up for them. So that's what I would say first and foremost. I think we feel guilt in not giving 100% of our time to our kids when we have them, especially when we only have them 50%. But I'll tell you that I am a better mother today because I am able to show up for my children super authentically and calm and taken care of because I've made myself a priority. When I was married, I waited for someone to tell me it was okay to put myself first. I sought out permission or a gift for, and that actually built up so much resentment against my ex-husband because it was like, why don't I get a break? Why are you always taking a break? Why am I not getting a break? And it's like, duh, Wendy, because you didn't ask for one. You got to use your voice, Wendy. Like, you've got words, like, use them, right? It sounds so simple, but it was so hard for me. I didn't have a voice. I was so afraid to use it. And now, well, I've always been, I mean, we could spend another hour talking about, my childhood, but I'm also first generation born here. So it was all about fitting in, being American, sit down, be quiet. So I learned this behavior and I duplicated it in my marriage. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second answer that I have is, what was a game changer for me was to stop looking at my ex-husband from the lens of being an ex-wife and instead to come from the vision of being mom. I am mom, he is dad. So our communication completely shifted because now I'm not reacting to him, but instead I'm responding as mom. Right. So there used to be days where on his custody days, my kids would call me and they'd be like, Dad, Dad, it's like the end of the world, which is, it wasn't, but to my children, something happened. Right. And it was like, they're trying to poke me to get me to call dad. Right. And I lens of mom, right? Not ex-wife, where I would pick up the phone, be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what is going on over there? Insert myself, get involved, right? Disempower him. Instead, I would just take a sip. I would just be like, how does that feel? Right? I'm going to be mom. So mom, what's mom? Mom is supportive. I'm showing up supporting my son.
Right.
How does that feel? What could you maybe say to dad? And it, of course they were like, God, that's not what I was looking for, but when you change the lens, right? Because it's like, it's not my day. It's up to their dad. Like, I have no say, like, until, what I think the biggest mind shift is when you look at when you look at your ex as mom or dad, your perception shifts where, you don't have to feel out of control. What you do when you come from mom or dad is you're back in control, right? Like, as a mom, what do I have control over? Well, I have control over my relationship with my son. I have control over a teaching moment with my son. I can be curious and I can support him in this moment, right? Because there's nothing's going to get solved, nor is anything good going to come from me picking up the phone and yelling at my ex-husband. Nothing.
Right.
And then the kid's going to get in the middle and this whole thing is going to blow up and blah, blah, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about keeping the peace. It's all about the kids. Put the kids in the center, not the middle, right? Picking up the phone and yelling at your ex,
The difference.
putting such a huge difference. So those are my two answers to your question.
And as you're talking, I'm just feeling for that mom, or it could be a dad, who's getting this call. Freedom, right? Like, this isn't my problem to solve. This is not my day with my children. I'm going to be the mom. I'm going to help support my child. I'm going to let it go. And I can go have what I need, right? And then if you need to focus on yourself, focus on your business, focus on your relationship, whatever it is, you have this great opportunity that kids aren't with you right now. You have some freedom. So why get yourself back all into that morass and muck, I guess.
Yeah. And I'll also tell you, like, there have been times where my ex-husband has called me and he's been like, how do I do this? And I'm like, I don't know. How are you going to do this? Right?
Sometimes you can give advice, sometimes you don't, but you don't always have to solve all the problems.
No.
They're adults, they can figure it out.
He's a big boy. He can figure it out. He's got to learn, and again, your listeners might be able to relate to this, but like I did everything when I was married. I
Mm,
made every decision. And I was so tired. I
yeah.
was so tired. And I can't let myself go back there anymore. And that's why when he'll call me and be like, what should I do? How should I handle this? And I'm just like, I don't know. I trust that you will make the best decision that you think is possible for our kids in this moment. Like, well, but what do you think? It doesn't matter what I think. It's not my day, right? Now, granted, medical decisions, school, like, yes, I am involved.
Yes.
But like, can my son go visit his girlfriend or not? Not my choice, not my weekend. Your choice, your time, your decision. Like, so I want to put a little caveat around that. Like, I am very involved in my children's education and medical decisions.
I don't care. Yeah. Buy him a motorcycle.
Oh, God. I think my heart just skipped a beat.
Oh, I love that. All right. Well, thank you. I really am so glad that we had this conversation. And as you know, I end every episode with some questions for what is your better divorce tip?
Yes.
So what would you say, Wendy? What is your better divorce tip?
So I'll leave you guys, since I already said the one about seeing your spouse through the lens of mom and dad, mom or dad, I'll leave the other one that we had talked about, which is really when you are engaging in a conversation with your former spouse, imagine that your child is either on the phone with you, looking over your shoulder as you're texting, or sitting next to you at your computer while you're typing an email. And that is how your correspondence with your co-parent, your children's other parent, gets to sound. For two reasons. Number one, you never know if the other parent is showing them information. You don't know if the kids are in earshot.
Right.
Sometimes you may or may not know you're on speakerphone. So it's about taking the high road. And I'm not saying to compromise your values. I'm not saying to be inauthentic. But what I am saying is that, it's sort of looking at it through the lens of anything you say can and will be used against you. Right? What is that? The Fourth Amendment? But it literally can.
Yeah.
And for what game at the end of the day? Like, what is it going to cost you? Because I can tell you, coming from somebody who thought my words were going to hurt him, they were going to make him choose me, they were going to make him change. They never did. All it did was hurt me. And so just remember that your kid, like, communicate with your co-parent as though your kids are right there,
Mhm.
because that's coming from a place of putting your children in the center and not the middle. Your kids didn't ask for the divorce. Your kids didn't divorce you. You divorced each other. Your kids still have each of you as a parent. So that's what I would leave your listeners with.
I love it. It's it reminds me of the saying, dance as if nobody's watching, but email and text as if your kids are watching, right? So
yes,
you can do some things as if no one is, but this is really important. Being somebody who, as an adult, actually found a long list of allegations that my parents were writing about against each other in
yeah,
their divorce. It's, it's so painful to find something like that. So if your kids picked up your phone or overhear you, you have to
yeah.
model what you want them to be and hear and feel. So
Yes, and if I can add one more quick thing on top of that, I know we're over time, but if your kids catch you, or if you accidentally say something, which I've been known to do, like literally there have been a very few, but a handful of times where I have spoken something out loud and my kids are standing right there and I'm like, oh my God, did I just say that out loud? And my kids are like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that was not okay. That was rude. That was disrespectful. I am so sorry. That was not okay. Like, I made a mistake. I'm really sorry.
You've
So
owned
own it. Own
Yeah.
it in front of your children, because it's also a moment, it's a teaching moment for you to teach your kids, like, I'm a human too. I make mistakes and I'm not nice to everybody all the time, but when I'm not and I recognize it, like, I get to own it.
Yes.
So I just want to put that little bow on top.
No one's perfect. We're all
No,
human. And
perfectly imperfect.
exactly.
Yes.
Well, Wendy, how can somebody find you, reach out to you if they wanted to learn more?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, if you guys want to check out my podcast, please feel free to do so. It's called the Power in the Pause podcast. It's on every platform. And then my social handle is my name as you see it here. It's Wendy Paige Sterling, and Paige has an I in there. It's Paige. And I also have a website, wendypagesterling.com. So I've got great resources for free. And, I have great content, I think, on my social media as well, to inspire people to live their best life and create a business from their passion. So
You
thank you
too.
for having me today.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And if anyone wants to find out more about Vacca Family Law Group, you can find us at vaccalaw.com and find out more about the podcast and all of our materials in addition to the podcast, I should say. So this has been another episode of a Better Divorce Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of a Better Divorce Podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.